Hi, what's up? I'm Channel Pup, the mascot for the Level-Headed Fanboy, and I just got done watching The Flash, and I'm gonna review it for you guys today. Now, just little disclaimer, I no longer do spoiler-free reviews, so if you want to know whether or not you should see it, well, my policy is, as always, your opinion is of more value to you than mine is. So if you've got the money to throw at it, I guess go see it for yourself, but also be warned, what you are watching is not a finished product. This film is full of just flat-out unfinished visual effects. If you're cool watching that with that in mind, then by all means. But I can absolutely understand if you do have reservations about paying money to see an unfinished product. So I'm not saying piracy's the way to go, but if you do want to find alternate methods of seeing the film, then I don't blame you. So that's that for the spoiler-free section. I'm gonna get into just discussing this now. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, this video will be waiting for you when you do. And if you haven't seen the movie, but you don't really care about spoilers, then we move, I guess. And if you have seen it, yeah, we move.
Tell me, did you subscribe? You will. And you'd better not forget to hit that like button as well. This video is not sponsored by Wayne Enterprises or LexCorp, so check out the Patreon link in the description below and consider making a monthly pledge. Men are still good.
So it kind of felt like this film was never coming out at some stage. Like, the lead up to this film was just ridiculous. This film has had an incredibly troubled production history, as we've gone from script draft to script draft. There was a point when Zack Snyder and Lord and Miller were going to work on this movie. There was a time when this film was going to be directed by Rick Famuyiwa, forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, and eventually we landed on Andy Muschietti, but then there was such a changing of the guard over at the DC department of Warner Brothers. Walter Hamada was originally a key producer, and it was being made under his regime to fit his vision of what the DC universe was going to be, but then swapped him out. Then we had Pam Abdi and Michael DeLuca, who wanted kind of a Snyderverse adjacent thing, and then we had James Gunn, who's just going to reboot everything entirely. So this film, being a film that's supposed to kind of set that up, had to undergo a lot of changes. Given the nature of this film, Warner Brothers needed to fully settle on what they actually wanted to do with DC going forward in order to actually finish this one off and release it. Not only that, but this film's PR was absolutely poisoned by the antics of Ezra Miller, just proving to be a bit of a nut job. And as marketing came along, I was having some concerns. A lot of the marketing was gravitating more towards Batman than it did The Flash. And again, it is probably due to those controversies surrounding Ezra Miller, which I'm not really going to go into in this video. They're out there if you want to do your own research. But yeah, Ezra Miller seems to be a bit of a nut. Also, though, just adapting Flashpoint for the very first Flash movie was just a bizarre idea to me. But there were also just things that I wasn't really on board with, such as writing out Ben Affleck's Batman and the original Snyderverse cast. I wasn't really entirely on board with what this movie was setting out to do. But with that said, the trailers did look good. There was a lot to be excited about, even if I did feel like this was overall a bit of a disservice to The Flash, or a bit of a disservice to DC's overall universe. I also just want to make a quick point of reference. I'm not going to have any kind of CW bias because I wasn't really a fan of that show either. I don't have much in terms of preconceptions of what a live-action Flash should be. So with everything in mind, knowing that the Snyderverse isn't coming back, knowing that James Gunn is taking over, knowing that things are going to change going forward, I kind of just sat my tushy down for a good time. So okay, let's go into that story then. So plot-wise, it begins with a day in the life of the Justice League as kind of like a last hurrah for DCEU Mark I before everything changes, and I think it does quite a nice job at establishing the status quo. The film has a pretty strong opening as Barry goes to a cafe for a sandwich, but the cartoonishly portrayed sandwich assembly man is taking ages as he's overly chatty with the customers, and that includes Barry. But Barry is called upon by Alfred, played by Jeremy Irons, who I was really happy to see again, to assist with a crisis in Gotham City. But there's little that Barry can do with his calorie count so low, as that's kind of what he needs to fuel himself. He reluctantly dashes from Central City to Gotham over the opening titles, and I gotta say, this is a really nice directorial flourish. I love this opening, okay? Showing his journey from Central City to Gotham all in one shot was an absolutely ingenious way of opening the film and conveying the Flash's super speed. Good stuff. I'm feeling kinda reassured by this point that I'm in for a good time. When he arrives, criminals are bombing up the place, including the hospital. And while Batman goes to chase after the criminals, the Flash has to go assisting civilians. The reveal shot of Batman as well also goes really hard as the shutter door lowers on the flying fox and we see Batman's silhouette eat up half of the screen. Okay, yeah. Damn good to see Batfleck again. And the action sequence with Batman that follows is great, as he's zooming through the city with tons of crazy gadgets popping out of his Batcycle, and we really see kind of how he has to constantly improvise even when his Batcycle is taken out. Now, one thing I did find a bit bizarre was how they didn't modulate Ben Affleck's voice this time. It goes to show that this Batman, even unmodulated, still has a really good Batman voice. Ben Affleck really nails this role. But even then, it's a piece of the iconography of Ben Affleck's Batman, and it's weird to see it not present here. This is the final appearance of Ben Affleck as Batman, and he's rocking up in a very strange version of the Batsuit, and he doesn't have that iconic Batfleck voice. And I'm also sad to say that none of Junkie XL's music cues made it to Batfleck's final action sequence, so it's over, boys, we lost. But hey, at least they didn't play the Danny Elfman theme over a Batfleck scene in this movie. It's just a shame because I know people say it's not that iconic, but it never really got a chance to be that iconic. But also, just like, have you listened to the Snyder Cut score? That thing goes hard. Like, why can't you revisit those themes? I think Ben Wallfish probably wanted to, as, like, there are themes that are adjacent to some of those Snyderverse themes in this movie, but they're just not quite there. They're kind of like, you know, your sort of facsimile themes in a way, like kind of like the royalty-free version, I guess. So while all this is going on, the hospital is crashing down and a load of babies come cascading out of the windows. We get a horrible joke from both Alfred and Barry about a baby shower, and this is where the visuals start to kind of fall apart, as these babies are entirely CGI, and they look really bad. There are also a lot of instances where the Flash is using a CGI double, and admittedly I don't see any other way of pulling off this action sequence without relying on that CGI double, but the problem is that the CGI looks really, really unfinished. It looks really bad to the point of being distracting. So Flash gets all the food he can to refill his calories and rescue the babies, one of which he rescues by putting it in a microwave to protect it. Right? So the title wasn't actually a joke. It's actually a spoiler, but you wouldn't know any better had you not seen the movie. Everyone is rescued while Batman finds himself in a bind as he and the criminal dangle over the Gotham River with a load of bombs, which is something Batman would and has definitely accounted for in the past, but okay, I guess he just kind of depends on other League members now, as Wonder Woman shows up with the lasso of truth to rescue them. This causes Batman to start droning on and on about his ego problems and how the real crime in Gotham is poverty and how he should just give all of his money away. It feels like every Facebook joke about Batman made it into this movie. Then Barry helps Batman unbind himself from the lasso of truth, and when he does that, he touches the lasso where he reveals that he hasn't had sex. Which is kind of funny up until they continue the joke with Barry passing it off as a metaphor for dark gothic fiction. The three League members have a little chat before going their separate ways. So I think this was a decent way of opening the film, and a fair enough last hurrah for these remaining Justice League members. No, Cyborg and Aquaman are not present here, Cyborg for obvious reasons, but no Superman either. Instead, we get another little cameo where this time we actually get to see the back of his head. Hooray! That's an upgrade from the usual shoulders and chest, I guess. Now, I do think this scene would have been more complete if Superman were present in some capacity. It's a last hurrah for the DCEU as we know it. Now, the reason for this is because the film was made under the Walter Hamada regime, and the dude just had a hate boner for Superman and Henry Cavill for some dumb reason. Dude seemed to do everything in his power to avoid Superman at all costs, and his intention with this film was to erase Superman, replacing him full-time with Supergirl. And I'm sorry, if you have that mindset, what business do you ever have running the ship at DC Films? How he was ever employed for that in the first place is a miracle to me. Now, tonally, this stuff with the Justice League Light does feel more like Joss Whedon's Justice League than it does Zack Snyder's, but it feels like it's settled into that mold a bit more now. It doesn't feel like we've defaced someone else's work. It's kind of like that incredibly light, punny sort of Joss Whedon tone, but done from the ground up so it doesn't feel anywhere near as egregious. I find it weird though watching Batfleck, how good Ben Affleck is as Batman, and it's just like, remind me again why Warner Brothers have done everything in their power to bury this. He's so good. Also, Wonder Woman is accompanied by her theme, which was a Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL cue. So it's not a right issue. There's no reason why they couldn't have Batfleck's theme accompany him. I'm so sick of the blatant favoritism. It's unprofessional. So we then spend some time with Barry as his dad's trial is the next day, but he doesn't have sufficient evidence in order to clear his dad's name. We get some very cleverly directed, cleverly cut flashbacks to Barry's origins, which consist of his time with his mother Nora, where admittedly they do lay it on a little thick. Yeah, Nora Allen is a loving mother, we get that, but then she starts singing, and then she and Barry compete for how much they love each other. Again, it's laid on really thick, but I can see why people would be willing to overlook this and see why people consider it charming. Maybe I'm just a cynical old git. So as a means of just kind of venting, Barry runs as fast as he possibly can and finds himself tapping into the Speed Force, which sends him into something called the Chrono Bowl, which is basically the center of the timeline where all of the existing multiverse and Barry's memories all manifest in kaleidoscope-like visions. Now, on paper, that's a really cool idea, but there's a lot of people in the Chrono Bowl, a lot of human faces. And they're entirely CGI. Entirely unfinished-looking CGI. Distracting CGI. More on that later. So Barry finds himself traveling back to the previous afternoon with the babies all falling, and this is represented by his head popping out of a portal, which gave me flashbacks to Thor Love and Thunder's floating axle head. Realizing he can travel time, he goes back to talk to Bruce to propose the idea of setting everything that went wrong in their lives right. And it's here where we get Ben Affleck's final scene as Bruce Wayne. And it's a nice scene. Bruce tells Barry that it's better to make peace with your scars. There are some things in life that hurt, but they have no solution. And it's better to live with that than to try and bargain with your scars. Barry asks Bruce if they can hang out, and we get Ben Affleck's very final line as Bruce Wayne. Maybe some other time. That was actually a really good final scene for Bruce, and a nice enough final line of dialogue. It's very bittersweet, but it almost feels a little open-ended too. A little hopeful. I'm really going to miss Ben Affleck as Batman. We had something truly special there, and it's a shame to see how badly this was all squandered. So Iris and Barry go back to Barry's place for beers, but Barry doesn't have any beers in his fridge, so he phases through the wall into his neighbor's apartment and grabs a couple of beers, where we get what is, in my opinion, the funniest line in the film, and it probably wasn't meant to be, but it's just so stupid. Beers, 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 I keep them in my fridge. Genuinely hilarious. As he and Iris talk, he realizes what he'd need to do to go and save his mum. So he bails on Iris and runs back into the Chrono Bowl, where we see visions of the DCEU as we know it. There was an instance where I was like, hey, it's Henry Cavill, and we can actually see his face. Oh god, what have they done to him? Because again, it's all in this uncanny valley Polar Express-ass CGI. So our last glimpse of Henry Cavill Superman was in the form of a CGI abomination. Thanks. You know, Warner Brothers, with your huge boner for the Christopher Reeve Superman, I'm sure you have an understanding that each generation holds its Superman very dearly. This is the last our generation gets of our Superman, so thank you. Thanks a bunch. It's not like us Henry Cavill Superman fans have been treated like absolute garbage over the past decade. Honest to God, never seen a studio treat its fans and its filmmakers so callously. So yeah, CGI Henry Cavill, thanks a bunch. Thank you. So it's here where Barry meets a mysterious figure, the Dark Flash, but only briefly. So here's the deal. Nora Allen was the only one home when she was murdered. This is because she forgot the tomatoes for the pasta sauce, and Henry Allen went to get them. So, Barry makes sure that she doesn't forget the tomatoes, so Henry Allen will be home and she never gets murdered. I mean, surely that's just one way of getting both of your parents murdered, right? Now, okay, generally speaking, in the comics, in the TV show, etc., It's Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash, that kills Nora Allen. Now, if we are following that, if we are ever leading to any kind of reveal that it was him, Barry, that's a massive character assassination for Eobard. Man's literally the Reverse Flash. Literally has all of the powers that Barry does, yet he's too chicken shit to confront Henry? It was me, Barry. I saw your dad and ran away. What sort of precedent does that set? Now, it's never explicitly stated who does kill Nora, so it might have just been some burglar. But it's like, okay, if it is Reverse Flash, then you've made Reverse Flash into a massive pussy bitch boy. If it isn't Reverse Flash, you've just nixed the best story you can possibly tell for the Flash. So either way, that's really not very good. So Barry arrives back in the present day, or maybe just not so distant past, to see Nora alive and well, and he goes to sit down with his parents for dinner, until suddenly he realizes he's not the only Barry in this timeline. His creation of a new timeline created a new Barry, one who doesn't hold the same sentimentality toward his mother or the things she did for him, because he never lost her, which is something Barry Prime has to kind of wrangle with. With this new Barry, Barry Prime kind of realizes where he can come off as abrasive and irritating. We've got a more responsible Barry who has learned from his experiences, juxtaposed with a new, less responsible, less sentimental Barry who isn't experienced. So Barry Prime takes new Barry to Star Labs, where he's due to be struck by lightning and gain his powers. But being afraid of getting struck, new Barry tries to escape his fate. So Barry Prime has to kind of wrangle with him, and they both end up getting struck by lightning. This gives new Barry powers, but puts an end to Barry Prime's powers. So why did they do this? If new Barry doesn't get his powers, Barry Prime's powers would fade. Yet that's kind of at odds with this film's depiction of time travel. But okay, maybe Barry Prime doesn't know that, so fair enough. There are some genuinely funny comedic moments as Barry Prime learns that he no longer has his superpowers, and he can't phase through walls or run super fast. But then there's this super tonally out of place scene where new Barry runs as fast as he can through the city, set to All Right by Supergrass, but his clothes catch fire and he finds himself completely naked in the middle of the street. So he rushes back home to Barry Prime. He gets given the flash ring, where the suit pops out of, and we get a joke about how Michael J. Fox no longer plays Marty McFly in this timeline. A joke that goes on way too long, as Barry Prime just can't seem to grasp the concept that this is a different reality. Like, he knows he's changed things, but Back to the Future is where he draws the line of what he can and can't believe. But disaster strikes as General Zod arrives on Earth, with the World Engine. So Barry Prime determines that he needs to find and assemble the Justice League to stop General Zod. But in this timeline, Victor Stone hasn't yet become Cyborg, and Arthur Curry is a dog. Nobody even knows that Superman even exists, but there is a Batman. And so the two Barrys head to Wayne Manor, seemingly abandoned, door open. They're eventually attacked by an old, retired Bruce Wayne who throws pots and pans and kitchen tools at them. Set to, I can't remember what song, but it was a rock track. Now, this was just a bizarre introduction to Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne. It felt very inauthentic to Tim Burton's style. My friend and I had a discussion beforehand as to whether or not this would be the original Michael Keaton Batman from the Burton films, or if it's just like an adjacent version from a different timeline. And as soon as this scene came on, we looked at each other, nodded, and were just like, yeah, okay, it's an adjacent timeline, because I can't see Burton's Batman doing any of this. With the trailers and the publicity, I praise the fact that Bruce didn't seem like a cynical old retired Bruce, and was ready and willing to help the Barrys. I like the idea that this Bruce was doing well. Boy, was I wrong. No, he's jaded, cynical, goofy, drunken, spends his days with his front door hanging open making pasta, and he initially refuses to help the Barrys. Also, why is his front door just left open at all times? Why is his home in the state it's in? You mean to tell me Bruce Wayne, a big celebrity, a billionaire, playboy philanthropist, nobody ever thought to break into Wayne Manor? Surely that would be a haven for the homeless if he's just casually leaving his door open. And okay, if that was just a one-time thing, boy, is that ever convenient. You know, it would have been better if the door was shut and we used the Barrys to phase through it. You literally have a means of getting Barry into Wayne Manor without just having the door hanging open. Speaking of pasta, Bruce also explains to the Barrys that the multiverse is like a big bowl of spaghetti. Some lines converge, some things have to happen. Canon events, if you will. And I kind of like how pasta is used to kind of highlight the themes of this movie. Yeah, this movie is just like a big bowl of spaghetti. Also, this film has a weird obsession with putting food all over Barry Allen's face. Like, whether it's spitting up broccoli or getting spaghetti all over his mouth. It's just kind of, it's kind of gross. This film is just in places kind of gross for no reason. Like, dude, you're an adult, eat like one. So, one character assassinated Bruce Wayne dialogue later, the Barrys decide to break into the Batcave to use his tech to track down Superman. The entrance is just down a manhole outside the manor, which I don't buy that. So we get some time with the Barrys in the Batcave, and we get to see some of Barry Prime's resentment of the new Barry, using his beloved monkey toy that Nora gave him as a dartboard. But Barry Prime has to kind of learn to understand that new Barry just doesn't hold the same sentiment towards Nora, because you never quite understand a person's value until you've lost them, and that's kind of nice. So, seeing Barry Prime in the Batcave, Bruce has a change of heart, and he finds Superman in a Serbian black site, and agrees to help the Barrys rescue him. And so they set out in the Batwing. As they break into the Serbian black site, the new Barry causes a total ruckus which alerts the staff, and it is a joke that does go on a bit too long as he just makes so much noise. But also, okay, the way all of these scientists and stuff get up, I honestly thought one of them was gonna get a bagel thrown at them. It's very Into the Spider-Verse. We get an excellent action sequence as Batman battles the staff of the Black Site. It's nice to see how, with technological advancements, Keaton's Batman is able to be much more agile on the battlefield, more akin to Batfleck, who obviously was a game changer in terms of how Batman action sequences are done. It's nice to see that our classic Batman has also kind of moved on with the times in terms of his fighting style. So they bust into the prison cell discovering not Superman, but a malnourished woman and a Superman suit, so they rescue her. New Barry gets shot in the leg and he's in absolute agony down for the count, unable to really help any further. This whole scene is really good, but there's also just a lot of really nice touches in there, a lot of creativity, such as New Barry using his super speed to try every code combination on the cell in a single second. We've got Batman using measuring tape and checking everyone's weight to determine what force he should use to blast the elevator out of the black site. It's nice to see this Batman using his noggin, and this is all really strong stuff. As in the Burton movies, this Batman is typically all about theatrics, less a tactician or detective. It's good to see that side of Batman applied to Michael Keaton's Batman after all these years. Once Supergirl is in the sunlight, her cells bathe in it, and she springs back into action in a really terrific sequence. It's hard-hitting, it's over the top, and the shot where Supergirl is just hovering in the distance, that goes really hard. So the two Barrys, Batman and Supergirl, head back to Wayne Manor. Supergirl initially unsure as to whether she wants to help humanity with General Zod after her experiences of being locked in Serbian black site, or whether she just wants it to be none of her business and vamoose. Meanwhile, Barry Prime decides he needs to get his powers back. So Batman straps him to a kite and an electric chair, and in the midst of a storm, Batman has him struck by lightning. Now, okay, I understand that Batman helping Barry get his powers back was a part of the original Flashpoint storyline, but that was a different Batman. That was Thomas Wayne, who wasn't so rigid on the no-kill policy. I can't see this Batman agreeing to just fry Barry Allen without thoroughly analyzing the odds for success. Barry gets struck once, and he's wounded and injured, just absolutely fried, like a king prawn. Barry tells him to do it again, and Batman's genuinely about to do it a second time. Batman, he's clearly going to die. Mate, what are you doing? This is so out of character for you. Supergirl steps in, swoops Barry up into the clouds for him to get struck by lightning there, and admittedly, while I'm questioning how much sense this scene makes, it does go really hard. The way it's shot, the visuals, the music, it's all really good stuff. A choppy edit later, and they arrive back in the Batcave. Barry Prime has his powers back, he gets his flash ring back, while we get a scene of new Barry carving up the Batman Returns suit and transforming it into a Flash suit. It's honestly pretty difficult to watch as this classic antique costume gets completely vandalized. But I did like the visual gag of New Barry being unable to turn his neck without the mask just slopping over to one side. That was really funny. Supergirl and Batman both agreed to help the Barrys to defeat General Zod, and they head into battle in the middle of the desert, where Zod is at a standoff with the military. Given that they couldn't hand over Supergirl to him, the Kryptonian ships open fire and all hell breaks loose. So the two Barrys help to slow down the Kryptonians with their combined powers. Batman uses the Batwing to take down Kryptonian ships, while Supergirl confronts General Zod, where it's revealed that Zod killed Kal-El as an infant. This puts Kara into total rage mode, as it was always her duty to watch over little Kal-El. It's kinda like a nice reverses of the final confrontation in Man of Steel, where General Zod laments his lost purpose in the ashes and dust of Metropolis. Kara's entire purpose has been taken from her, and now all she can do is beat General Zod into submission. Zod, though, is absolutely nerfed in this film. I'd say Supergirl puts less of a fight up than Superman did, but Zod gets absolutely bodied. There's so many hits that he takes that if you've seen Man of Steel, you know that he could easily get up from it. He ultimately prevails in the end, stabbing Supergirl, gaining her blood so that he can activate the World Engine. But man, she really chucked him about something rotten. Also, the special effects on Zod's mask are just very off this time. The Batwing sustains damage to the point that the ejector seat no longer works, so Batman decides to fly the Batwing into the Kryptonian ship in a kamikaze attack, killing him in the process. Which I don't buy. That would be a last-ditch effort, but the guy's like, oh, ejector seat's not working, better die. So New Barry uses the time travel to undo all of that and give Batman and Supergirl another chance. But they still die, with Keaton's final words being, maybe some other time. Which I appreciate. I like how he has the same final words as Batfleck. That's kind of poetic, and it makes a nice parallel, a nice through line between these two versions of Batman. And that's the last we see of Michael Keaton's Batman, which is pretty anticlimactic. Also, God, they had both Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck and never had them meet. Oh, man. At this point, New Barry is getting impatient. He's getting carried away as he keeps trying to undo everything, using time travel to gain the upper hand, creating more and more divergent timelines, all while becoming less human. As the Kryptonians attack him, he phases through their attacks, and shards of the Kryptonian metal become stuck in his arms and shoulders. Odd that there's no pain from that, given how upset he was by the bullet earlier in the film. But hey, I guess phasing makes a difference, I don't know. At this point, the two Barrys confront each other in the Chrono Bowl, and I looked to my friend and said, oh god, the final battle's gonna take place in this nasty-ass CGI abomination, isn't it? So Barry Prime decides that he needs to let Nora die in order to prevent all of this, but the new Barry refuses to let her go, which turns him into Dark Flash. Kinda. Well, Dark Flash emerges from the future, and Barry Prime and New Barry are both there, but New Barry is becoming the Dark Flash. So there's three Barrys. Barry Prime, New Barry, and Dark Flash. But Dark Flash is New Barry. Okay, makes sense? Fine, cool, we move. So with Dark Flash creating so many new timelines, the multiverse starts to split open, and we get a whole barrage of cameos ranging from, hey, remember that, to here's a brief glimpse at a film we never made. There's also some really weird omissions. I'm gonna talk a lot more about this scene in a bit, but for now, let's continue on with the story. Dark Flash goes to kill Barry Prime, but New Barry jumps in the way, erasing Dark Flash from existence. And so, Barry runs back to bid farewell to Nora and take the tomatoes away, allowing her to die. The scene where they say goodbye is actually very emotionally resonant. Like, yeah, it drives it home. It does work, and it does feel earned. It's a very cathartic and sad ending. While there, Barry does make a small change in that he gets Henry Allen to look up at the security camera, proving his innocence. But wait, surely you've learned that you shouldn't meddle with the timeline? If moving some tomatoes was enough to make Superman not exist, surely, like, making Henry Allen look up is good. What? Well, it does seem to have some consequences, so we'll get into that. Back in the present day, Henry Allen's innocence is proven, and he's released from jail. Happy ending, yay! Barry goes to meet up with Bruce Wayne only for this to turn into a Nespresso commercial, as Bruce Wayne is now played by George Clooney. Cowards. You know what you should have done? Had another action sequence be set up, but when Barry goes to meet up with Batman, you've got him there in the nipple suit. Why didn't you bring back the nipple suit? This is a sorry excuse for a Batman No Way Home. Well, that's the ending of the film. Roll credits set to another piss-awful CGI dog and CGI babies raining down. We get an after credits that's completely pointless and robs Aquaman of his dignity. There's nothing worth talking about in this scene. It's just Barry reciting the events of the film to Aquaman, confirming that other Batmen do exist in the multiverse. Okay, so narratively, it's a mixed bag. There are ideas here that I like. I like how the film doesn't really have a central villain. The core conflict is Barry and himself. Barry confronting his scars and the version of himself that's unwilling to let go of the past. And that version of him turning into a monster. Wait, this is just Lightyear, but worse. Yeah, everything that this film does do well, it's actually done better in Lightyear, so watch that movie instead, I guess. People were so unfair on that movie, man. Like, if people are going to come out in droves and call this one of the best superhero movies ever made, I want Lightyear to get a retrial. God, it really is so difficult being this based and better than everyone else. If you can't tell, I'm joking around a little bit here. Yeah, I do like Lightyear. Yeah, I think Lightyear did it much better than The Flash did. But you run along, young buck, like what you like. The Dark Flash thing was still a solid twist, and it's one you can see coming a mile away, but it's pretty narratively cathartic, I guess. I do think that they went a bit overboard with the comedy for Barry, making him at times just a bit too dense. New Barry has this running gag of having this super obnoxious laugh, which he does constantly, even in serious scenes. And is so put on, he's just go, oh, like that, that's the laugh. And it's like, if this happened like once or twice in one of the early scenes, that'd be fine, but when it's happening in the final battle, God, I want to die. It strikes me as this kind of improv thing that Ezra Miller maybe did behind the scenes as just a funny joke, and it made it into the film, and then got milked to oblivion. With Barry, there are times when he is genuinely funny, but I do wish we could just see a more serious portrayal of this character in a big budget film. At least we kinda got that with the Snyder Cut, even then he was comedic, but here it's just dialed up to 100. I'll say this, it is a Flash movie, okay? It might have been marketed as a Batman thing, but this is a Flash movie. It's not a Batman movie, it's not a Justice League Light. The central focus of this film is Barry and his conflict with himself. I also like how the film explores what it would be like to meet yourself. There's a lot here that does work. Michael Keaton was great as Batman, but like everything else in this movie, his scenes were a mixed bag. I didn't like the drunken hobo Bruce in his first scene. I don't buy him immediately choosing to kamikaze the Kryptonian ship just because his ejector seat is buggered. I don't buy him just willingly getting Barry struck by lightning in hopes of him getting powers. He's smarter than that. With that said, let's talk positively. The scene where he busts Supergirl out of the Serbian prison is great. Genuinely, it feels like a little Batman 89 adventure, and it's genuinely worth the price of a ticket. Supergirl was also really cool. Sasha Calle does great in the role as this stoic, wounded version of the character, doubting humanity and doubting saving it. She views herself as a Kryptonian first and foremost. She's not a human like Clark Kent. And in action as well, she's really cool. Iris West was also really good in this film. She gets a very small role, but I really liked Kiersey Clemons in the role as Iris. There have been a lot of people saying that her role in this film was one of the things she says, there's like a line of dialogue that confirms the Snyder Cut as canon to this universe. And, I don't think so. It kinda. It's one of those things where she's like, oh, we've met before, right? And it's kind of like a wink to the scene from the Snyder Cut where Barry rescues her, but you can't rule out that that might have just happened off screen as well, and this film does give me more Joss Whedon vibes than Zack Snyder vibes. So I'm not convinced. But you know what? This is the end of this. This is the end of all of this, so like the one I choose as canon is the Snyder Cut. So okay, even though the opening Justice League scene was still a bit too Joss Whedon for my tastes, with constant lasso of truth jokes at Batfleck and Barry's expense, I'd be lying if I said I didn't get a kick out of seeing these versions of the characters for one last time, all working together. Conceptually, the Chrono Bowl was a really great idea. These kaleidoscope visions, good stuff. Also, when Barry first steps into the Speed Force, and he goes all blue and his face stretches, that was a lot of fun. I also love how they handled phasing and Barry's molecules. As I stated earlier, the opening with Barry running from Central City to Gotham was a brilliant way to open the film. I even love what they did with the title card. I think the way the Flash was generally portrayed in this was really solid. And the lightning effects, I'm someone who prefers an older Flash. I prefer the Flash before he shot lightning out of his ass. But like, the lightning effects look fine here too. The scenes with Barry and his mum, again, I felt they did lay it on a little thick, but they were nice. I thought the new Barry was a cool way of telling this Flash's origin story in an innovative and fresh way. Kinda non-linear, you know, you don't have to wait until the origin's over to get to all the action. Alright, getting a bit more negative now though, as for General Zod. Well, Michael Shannon has gone on record saying that these multiverse films feel more like you're just pulling toys from your toy box. And I fully agree in this case. I was really looking forward to General Zod, as Man of Steel is one of my favorite films, but he gets nothing to do. The scene with him effectively feels like you pulled General Zod, two Flashes, Supergirl, and Keaton's Batman out of your toy box, shoved them in a sandpit, and just clinked them together like they are action figures. And it's just a load of CGI visual vomit with no geography, so to speak. And what especially struck me as weird was there's this musical montage of the Barrys now synchronized, and it's this happy, triumphant moment, but they also cut to Supergirl here, and she's just found out that Kal-El was killed by Zod as a baby. So we've got these two dudes in perfect synchrony, juxtaposed with a broken, wounded Kryptonian beating Zod into submission, all with this happy rock music tone. It's really, really at odds. And that Kryptonian battle scene was just bad. People complained about collateral damage in Man of Steel, but I'd take seeing that fight take place in the big city over Minecraft Superflat. But I tell you what, this battle has nothing on the final battle between Barry and Dark Flash, as the film grinds to a halt to show us horrendous, deep-faked AI CGI abominations of George Reeves Superman, Christopher Reeve Superman, Helen Slater Supergirl, Nicolas Cage Superman, Adam West Batman, Jay Garrick Flash, and it goes on and on. If you thought the Justice League video scene in Batman v Superman was egregious, I need you to admit that this is absolutely no better. This whole thing reminded me of when that weirdly problematic comic book page on Twitter was posting these AI deepfake videos of like the Justice League cast trying to compel Warner Brothers to sell the Snyderverse to Netflix. Literally, it's the same thing, minus the misogyny towards Jennifer Holland at the very least. But also, okay, you might already know my stance on using technology to revive dead actors. And if you don't, I'll quickly go over it. I think if the actor died fairly recently and so signed off to having their likeness used in this way, it's okay. If they agreed to it, fine. But this technology wasn't really a thing when Christopher Reeve or George Reeve died. It certainly wasn't a popular thing when Adam West died. Now, you could say the estate signed off on it, but the estate is not the person. I think if the person hasn't agreed to it, it shouldn't be done. So what was done with Christopher Reeve, George Reeve, and Adam West? Just absolutely morbid. That should never have been on the cards. Stock footage? Different matter, but CGIing them is just a no-no. But then there's the omissions, the people they could have used and didn't. You mean to tell me we couldn't squeeze Grant Gustin or John Wesley Shipp in here? Why not Val Kilmer's Batman? Why not Ryan Reynolds as Green Lantern? Brandon Routh Superman? Tyler Hoechlin? There's a wealth of living CW actors that I'm sure would have happily returned for this film. It's not just absurd, it's monstrous. But then, as I say, they're all CGI, or AI, or deepfaked, and it's distractingly obvious, which brings me to the biggest bone of contention that I have with this film. The thing that takes this from a mixed bag to being a flat-out, unacceptable, defective product. This film is not finished. It's not releasable. What we have here feels like a combination of previs and actual footage, but you cannot release a film in this state. I'm sorry, but there comes a point where you are taking the piss. I'll start by mentioning the Chrono Bowl, which is just full of these Polar Express-looking CGI abominations. We get our final appearance of the Henry Cavill Superman, and it looks atrocious. Now, I've seen some folks trying to pass it off as a stylistic choice, that these were meant to be these uncanny facsimiles of these people, but then, why take the direction of making them look photorealistic? Would it not be better to do the Across the Spider-Verse style hologram effect? Maybe make them look like apparitions of light that resemble those characters, or go for the Kryptonian liquid hologram effect. Anything would be better than this. They look hideous. But it's not just the Chrono Bowl that's the problem with the CGI in this film. Anytime the Flash has to do some kind of special stunt, we get a fully CGI double, which makes sense. But it just looks flat out unfinished every time. It looks like that scene from The Matrix Reloaded, and in a 2023 release, that's just not okay. But the biggest problem, the most lingering one, is the two Barrys. This Parent Trap effect that even Doctor Who, on its teeny tiny budget, managed to nail with the two David Tennants in Series 4, you can usually manage this kind of thing by having two separate shoots and splicing the shots, or rotoscoping, or green screening. But they don't do that here. Or at least, they don't do it often. There are so many occasions where one of the Barry's faces just looks like an Instagram filter, and is drifting around as his head moves. It reminds me of the projected singing head statues at Disneyland in the Haunted Mansion. There are even times where they do this where there's only one single Barry on screen, which is just insane to me. And it's not like it's just in the distance. It's close up, lingering shots. I'm sorry, I can't look past this. But it still gets worse. During the final fight with Dark Flash, as Barry witnesses the multiverse opening, we have mid-shots and close-ups lingering for long periods of time of a fully CGI Barry Prime, his face fully CGI emoting. And it's jarring, it's distracting. How did this happen? I'm not exaggerating here, I swear. It's really bad. Now for me, I can accept a little bit of bad CGI here and there. A film is rarely defined by its visuals, but this actively got in the way of my enjoyment of the film. It was distracting. Anytime I thought I was getting immersed, I'd immediately be pulled out of the experience by a CGI horror, and in 2023, that is absolutely unacceptable. If you think I'm exaggerating, I'll put a link to my tweet with screenshots of this film in the pinned comment. I'm not willing to risk my YouTube channel with showing that, but I am willing to risk my Twitter, so link to the tweet will be in the pinned comment. I don't usually go posting pirated screenshots, but this needs to be seen. You need to know that you are not watching a finished product before paying money to see it. Now, I'm not here to point fingers. I'm not blaming this all on Andy Muschietti. This film must have been a nightmare to make, with constant changing of the guard, constant reshoots, Ezra Miller's antics, etc., etc. There are some great directorial decisions here, but the visuals just decimate all of that. They're not finished, and you cannot release a film in this state. It's hideous, to the extent that I feel like I owe Justice League's visuals an apology. I feel like maybe this is a sign that we do need to be stricter on CGI in movies, because if we've gotten to the point where studios are comfortable pushing this out, thinking that we're just gonna accept it, this is a dystopian time to be a cinema goer. Yes, this is enough to have a bearing on my opinion of the movie. This is enough to make me say no, it's not just a mixed bag, it's bad. The Flash has its moments, the performances are good, the central conflict is good, and it's nice to get a bit of DLC for Keaton's Batman and Man of Steel. I mean, that is what it feels like. No, you know what, I'll tell you what it feels like. This feels like a buffet at a Butlins resort after business hours. Everything's gone stale, but it tastes just palatable enough for me to say, this might have been a sausage. We've got a DC Universe buffet, but everything in it is stale, undercooked, and cold. I'm not accepting this as the end of the DCEU. I'm not accepting it as the end to the Snyderverse. The Snyderverse ended with Zack Snyder's Justice League. Things like Shazam and the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker are their own thing, and I love them all the same. But this right here is a write-off. This version of the DCEU is a complete write-off. I'm gonna cherish the movies I enjoyed from this, and we're lucky to have a trilogy of unapologetically director-driven movies with the Snyder Trilogy. And now I'm ready to move on. Thank you, Zack Snyder. Thank you to all the other great filmmakers involved and great actors. The Flash here is cinematic vomit. I'm ready to just put all Yellow down at this point and move on to James Gunn's first DCU chapter. Screw this movie. If you do get enjoyment out of it, I get why. I get it. But I can't defend an unfinished product. At least not one in this dire of a state. God help us all if this is the standard that studios are willing to put out in 2023. So what do you guys think? What did you think of The Flash? Did you enjoy it? Did you not like it so much? Comment below, discuss. The floor is yours. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, be sure to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and if you want your name in the credits of my videos, as well as extra content, you can do so with as little as $1 a month over on Patreon. Link in the description below. For now, a special shout out goes to the patrons in the $10 tier. Their names are as follows:
Dale Diddy, Kyle Bennett, That Jordo, Kenji Cobain, Legendary Ray Ray, Dr. SP here with your PSA. Father's Day's here. I'll have to give him a call with the phone he paid for. Thanks, Dad. Sergio, Sursa Skeptic. Did you know the skin on your elbow is called a weenus?
We continue with the patrons in the $5 tier. Their names are Yakko the Volcanic Muto, Broski, SSS06, Dazzle Fizzle, and Council of Geeks. Thank you all so much for your generosity and support. Thank you guys for watching, and have a great day.